All right, let's bring in our political panel now. Former media advisor to Scott Morrison, Andrew Carswell, and former Chief of Staff to Bill Shorten, Cameron Milner. Great to see you both. Now, the government has launched a scare campaign against Peter Dutton personally. I want to get your take on it. Here it is.
These are all cost of living measures introduced by the federal Labor government because we understand the pressure families are under, and every little bit helps. But look who was opposed to every single one of them. Whichever way you look at it, you'll be worse off under Dutton.
Now, let's see what you think will be more effective, that Labor ad or this coalition ad.
Later, I started a small family business. It grew to 40 staff who had families, mortgages and aspirations, which means that you are relied on to balance the books and be responsible. As a minister, I learned that a strong economy and a safe community are central to everything, that you sometimes need to stand up to vested interests and always make decisions in our national interest.
Cameron, what does this tell you about how Labor and the coalition are now pitching themselves?
Well, it tells you that Peter Dutton has actually got some really positive numbers, and he's obviously opened up with a very professional ad talking about himself. The piece you missed, which I love the most in that ad, is the picture of him and John Howard, actually, which is in the next section of that ad. I think it's a perfect and poignant moment of Peter Dutton's sort of history in politics. But it tells you Labor's running scared. I mean, Labor promised a new politics. Albo promised that politics was going to be changed by him. And instead, he's just gone back to the sludge bucket, got the muck and started to throw it. I mean, this is just a... that said, though, it's a pretty weak ad. It's a pretty weak negative. A bit like Labor's leader.
Agreed. It's not a good ad. I mean, you've got to read what's in each of the boxes. You know, no one has time for that when they're busy. You need an ad that's going to grab you straight away if you're making school lunches or whatever it is. Andrew, clearly
absolutely, in our busy lives,
100%. Andrew, clearly there's an effort from Dutton's campaign to sell him as the human. They're trying to, change his image a little bit, soften it a little bit. What do you think?
Well, first and foremost, I actually disagree on the Labor ad. I think it's more effective than you're giving it credit for. Yes, it's a little bit wordy at the start, but clearly they're moving away from this strategy where they're denigrating Peter Dutton for his strong leadership characteristics. That was never going to work. That's actually pointing to that guy and say, vote for him because he's strong. And when Australians are crying out for strong leadership, they're going to flock towards the guy that is actually strong. So I think it's actually a sensible ad from Labor for once, I must admit. It gets the tone right. And it's clearly directed at women voters as well. I think it just taps into that innate thought that women voters have towards essential services and the funding of essential services. So I think it taps into that. But it's very clear also on the flip side that this is the Dutton that most people see behind the scenes. And that is what's being that Liberal Party are trying to address here. They have this preconceived idea who Peter Dutton is based on the work that he has done in this place, the hard jobs that he's had to undertake, the fact that he's been an attack dog on behalf of very determined governments. So that's one side of Peter Dutton, but not often people see the other side, and those that have worked closely with him and know him personally know that what is being displayed on this ad is the Peter Dutton.
All right, let's have a look at who the biggest donors have been to the political parties over the past year. Topping the list for Labor, perhaps surprisingly, was billionaire Anthony Pratt. He gave $1 million to the Labor Party. The Liberals received nearly $600,000 from Meriton Properties, controlled by Harry Triguboff, and $500,000 from Gina Reinhart's Hancock Prospecting. Cameron, this is quite interesting, and this is during the past year, so we don't know the election period yet, but this could change once again.
It could, but what's good about this is we've got disclosure. It's good in Australia that we actually have got transparency around the political donations that are made, and I think corporate Australia should be contributing to the political process. And I think when you see Anthony Pratt over the years and Visy Holdings, you'll find they're pretty equal. So next year, I suspect it'll square up. But nevertheless, it's great that they're involved and great they're making that contribution because they should be involved in our politics and they should be supporting our political parties of both political persuasions.
Yeah, and we know that Anthony Pratt just gave $15 million to Trump's campaign, so you never know, he could support Peter Dutton this time around. We just don't know yet. Andrew, can you tell us a bit about Climate 200 and the Teal's funding and how that compares?
Yeah, I don't honestly have an issue with the funding on either side of politics, and even with the Teals as well. I agree, transparency is king here. We have a great system of transparency that shines a light on who is giving what and for what reason, and I think that's appropriate. But we're not talking big dollars here also compared to the American system. I think a lot of political parties here in Australia, they seriously run off the smell of an oily rag. So we don't see that type of issue here with other jurisdictions. And I would note too that even when people do throw tens of millions of dollars at the political system, it doesn't necessarily buy you influence, as Clive Palmer found out.
Indeed. All right, well, there was an interesting piece in The Australian today. Chris Mitchell, the columnist, has described the partnership between the Prime Minister and the Treasurer as similar to between Kevin Rudd and Julia Gillard. Cameron Milner, you know these characters, these people very well. What did you think of this column and this analysis?
Oh, well, look, the Albanese government's far worse than the Rudd-Gillard-Rudd period, and for one simple reason. The Labor caucus should be doing its job and finishing off a lazy and weak leader. And they did it to Rudd when he failed. They did it to Gillard when she failed. The Labor caucus has outsourced their responsibility to voters at the next election, rather than doing what they should have done, which is roll the guy.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating to hear you say that the current Albanese government is worse than the Rudd-Gillard-Rudd chaos. Worse. And I think that is what a lot of people are starting to say, that this is the worst Prime Minister perhaps in Australia's history. All right, Andrew, we're out of time. We'll get your response next week. Great to have you both with us again.